Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the penultimate round of the Apex Rear Wing DRM Championship. Yes, that's right, just 2 races remain, and we still have 3 drivers in with a very real chance of clinching this title. Can Mr. Consistency himself, Goofball Antics, bring it home? He leads by just 10 points after finishing every race this season on the podium. Or could it be Sam Smith? The Pink Pig is on a fine run of form quite at the moment. 3 victories, 4 pole positions, and 6 out of a possible 8 fastest lap in that beastly Porsche 935 Turbo. Or could the defending champion Ziras do the unthinkable, coming back from a disastrous opening round, scoring no points and not clinching his first victory until after the halfway point in the season? For the final 2 rounds of the championship, we head to Brazil for 2 very, very different circuits. One likely to favour the Porsche, the other likely to favour the BMW 320. It is beautifully poised. My name's Stairs, bringing you all the action tonight. Matt Dunlop joins me in commentary as always. Good evening, Matt.
Good evening, Stairs, and good evening to everyone watching at home around the world, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Jacarepaguá circuit, also known as the Automobilista International Nelson PK, located just outside of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, or of course was located just outside of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Of course, this track was unfortunately scuttled around 2015, 2016 to make way for the Rio Olympic Games venues. But before that, of course, this track hosted events such as the kart racing circuit. I do believe there was some MotoGP here, and of course the Brazilian Grand Prix back in the day, Stairs.
Yes, and of course we are using the 1988 version of the circuit, so that will be familiar to the F1 fans that we have in the audience who were familiar with Formula One 30-odd years ago. What a fantastic circuit indeed. Let's have a quick look at the point situation as we head into the penultimate round of the Apex Rear Wing DRM Championship. And as mentioned earlier in the broadcast, Goofball Antics leading the way by just 10 points from the informed Sam Smith and Ziras on the way. Berto, unfortunately, not present for the last 3 rounds, in fact 4 rounds I believe it is, of this championship, so has done remarkably well considering how many he has missed. He's likely to drop from where he is currently sat in 4th place. Madbird knocking on the door of 4th, but a bit of pressure from behind with Brenton Foley just 5 points adrift, and Resist, who has had some very, very strong finishes of late on 75 points, also looking to move up that leaderboard. Roadhog sits on 65 points in 8th place ahead of Pablo. Very, very consistent points getter is Pablo. He's on 56, just 3 points ahead of Nether for the Outworld Racing team, who rounds out the top 10, mate.
Yeah, and we do have a few guys missing in this race, so there are going to be a couple of holes located throughout the field. The biggest, of course, being Berto, who is still on holiday and will be until the end of this week, so he will be back for the final round at El Salvador, but he is not present for this race here in Jacarepaguá. Also missing a decent match, another one of the Porsche 935 runners, Tyrrell and Bang, or Bang may be coming in for qualifying, we're not sure yet, but Tyrrell is definitely missing in the Ford Capri, as well as Greg Tara in the BMW 320. A newcomer for the series who won't be joining us tonight, unfortunately. So it's shaping up to be either a 10 or 11 car field. And as you may have been seeing so far on the camera angles of this practice session around the circuit, a lot of the drivers, especially or including some of the more experienced ones, have been getting tripped up all over this circuit, haven't they, Stairs?
They have. It has been described as, and I won't use the full word, but it starts with a C of a corner of a circuit. So that has been probably not a particularly favourable description, I would say, but I think it'll produce very, very good racing indeed. Likely, I would have thought ahead of tonight's racing to favour the Porsche runners, considering that it has an incredibly long back straight in which the BMW 320s are topping out, even with extended gearing, and so that will be an opportunity for the Porsche to stretch its legs, more so I would have thought than last round's circuit of Algarve, the Portimao circuit. But Sam Smith only holds an advantage just over 1/10 of a second ahead of Ziras, although he has just bettered that by some margin as he sets a 141.3 to go 7/10 of a second clear of Ziras.
Yeah, it just came through. He was just posting that lap, but he is still getting pretty slippery, especially when he's touching some of these curbs. You'll notice all around this very flat circuit that the curbs are incredibly aggressive. So if you put too much load on them, you're going to spin out. because you won't have any air underneath the car to suck you to the ground. You won't have any pressure underneath the car. You'll be coming right off the ground, and of course, those curbs must be as slippery as a butcher's block because these cars are spinning out left, right, and center when they're even close to grazing them. And with such fast corners, and it's not a particularly wide circuit. It's not narrow enough as Sam Smith rotates at the Norte hairpin just before the main straight, as I was just saying. It's not narrow enough to cause too many problems, but it's not wide enough to catch you if you spin out either. So it's a standard width track, and it's really, it's a lot more to it than meets the eye, isn't it, Stairs?
It is a lot of long radius corners, very fast corners. It is a flat circuit. As you can see from that shot, that is the back straight that we're looking at as Sam Smith goes down to the long left-hander at turn 6, which is going to be mighty tricky on the tyres, and a thirsty circuit as well. So we're not expecting to see anyone be able to make a one-stop strategy work like we have seen in the past. Often that is, of course, aided by the addition of a safety car, but lots of grass runoff on this circuit. Usually the safety car is more prevalent on circuits where the walls are a lot closer to the racetrack. So very unlikely that we're going to see anyone get away without making a pit stop tonight.
Yeah, we're having a chat in the group chat earlier about the nature of this circuit and how it is indeed very thirsty, as you touched on. And I think that's going to bring the Porsche 935s back into contention, which is an odd thing to say given how much power they have and consequently how much petrol they drink. But there's a lot of long straight sections all around here, and the BMW 320s aren't going to fare much better themselves because they're going to be spending more time sitting on that rev limiter, drinking a lot of fuel just to match the speeds at any attempt possible to get anywhere near close to the 935's top speed. So no one's going to be able to no-stop this race as far as I'm concerned. Everyone will have to make a stop. It's just a matter of when and how you do it. And tyre wear is especially going to be a thing as well because there's not too many long corners. The Sewell curve at the end of the back straight that we mentioned just before is probably the most painful on the tyres, especially the right-hand side tyres. We have a couple of high-speed corners, but they're not particularly long ones. They're sort of turn 3, Phillip Island, the Stoner Corner-esque sort of things. High-speed kinks with a medium-sized radius, and there's a lot of those style corners around this circuit.
There certainly are. One man that I'm keen to see how he goes tonight, is currently sat in third in practice, is Resist, and he has been the big improver this season from my point of view, and could be a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons when it comes to the guys who are vying for the championship. 3 of them, of course, as we've detailed, still in contention, but Resist has been on podium pace for much of the latter part of this season. Was very much looking like he was on target for a podium finish last week before an unfortunate power failure dropped him out of the race. Out of the last 4 races, he's finished on the podium twice, and his qualifying efforts in the last 4 races, 3 of them, he was third or better.
Yes, since he's gotten to grips with this BMW M1, he's really been starting to shine, and he's been carrying a fantastic pace through any circuit that he visits. So really hope Resist can do well here and make up for that huge loss of points that he suffered at the last race, where he dropped out of what was, I think, 3rd position on track at the time due to an unfortunate power failure, which definitely can and will happen to any of these drivers. One of the unfortunate natures of sim racing, of course, is you have to be careful of your own power and technical failures. But it does unfortunately drop Resist a little bit further out of the championship fight than he would be hoping. He's now on 75 points, and there's no way he's going to be able to recoup that against the top 3 runners at the moment. But he's got nothing to lose, and he's going to be giving it his all and trying to get as much out of that BMW M1 around this circuit as he can. And with the amount of power behind the driver's seat of that vehicle, I'd say he's got a pretty good chance of mixing up for the podium spots.
Very much so. We've got just 1 minute remaining until the end of this practice session, and we are experiencing some buffering issues with some of our audience members, we believe. So we're just going to take a quick moment to try and rectify that before the qualifying session begins, and so we can bring you all of that as smoothly as we possibly can. So just bear with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil for the 8th round of the Apex Rear Wing DRM Championship. And we're about to head into qualifying where Roadhog is going to be the first man to set a lap in our shootout. Here he is coming onto his out lap. And for the bit of a moment there as he came onto the racetrack and straight onto the grass. Let's just quickly go through what this session is all about. Each driver gets 1 lap, and that's it. So they set their times in the reverse order from which they set times in practice. So the slowest go first, and the fastest go last.
Roadhog being the slowest runner in that practice session means he will start uncharacteristically early in the qualifying session. We've normally seen him floating around 6th or 7th, and then qualifying up in the slightly upper positions, up to as high as 5th in some races. So he's normally been pretty good. Just not sure how well he's able to cope around this Jacarepaguá circuit so far. We saw he ran off on the inside of turn 1 on his out lap due to the nature of the cold tyres, of course. So hopefully he can put a lap together and put down a nice time in that Toyota Celica for his qualifying lap. And of course, qualifying doesn't have a massive bearing, of course, on how your race is going to run, because it's a 55-minute race. It's quite a long time, relatively speaking. So you do have plenty of time to, move around the field quite an amount if you are fortunate, or in the other case, unfortunate enough to do so. But the main reason why a lot of these drivers want to qualify high up the grid is so they don't get caught up in any incidents that may happen on the starting grid, of which there have been a few in the early stages of the season, especially. In the recent races, hasn't been so bad off the start. These guys are really getting comfortable with these cars now, launching them, getting them going, getting the clutch bite at the right point. So they're looking pretty comfortable off starts now, and they will have a chance, of course, to practice those starts during the warm-up session that comes after qualifying. But Roadhog is now across the control line, and he starts his flying lap of this just over 5-kilometer circuit, which has a lot of high-speed sections. Into turn 1, he's looking pretty good so far. A little bit wobbly on the exit of that bend, mind you. He's still struggling for grip by the looks of it, so he wasn't able to get enough temperature into those tyres. Hopefully they'll be nice and warm by the time he gets around to the first sector split, which is just around this next corner. So he's just gone through turn number 2, I believe it was. So he goes through the first split. It's 26.176. That's the benchmark that we'll be seeing so far. We won't have anything to compare that to because I don't have the practice times in front of me, I'm afraid. He's now going through turns number 4 and 5, which are referred to as, a little bit of a shaky moment there for him, of course. The Nonato and the Norte curves. Now he comes into the back straight. This is where the Porsche 935s especially are going to really be stretching their legs all the way down this huge ribbon of tarmac. Completely straight, completely flat, no bumps whatsoever. Can be a little bit hairy when you're trying to jump on the brakes down here, though, because there's a little bit of a change in the tarmac there, and you can run it wide, as we've seen Roadhog do just there. Not too far away from the second sector split. And let's see how he's doing, of course. I've got to remember where it is. I think it'll be just around this corner. It's 1 minute 9.309 as he goes through this S's section, if you will, on the run towards this almost hairpinny corner. Not really a hairpin, it's a very tight corner, 135 degrees, a Lagoa bend. On the run down, you can see the grandstands from here, from the driver's seat. There they are now. Jump on the brakes into the almost 90-degree bend called Box, which is very appropriate, given it's the corner just before the pit entry, which he drives past now on the run down to Vitoria, which is the final corner on this circuit. Very sideways.
No, last corner, that's it. Onto the grass, and that has put paid to that lap. What a disaster there for Roadhog. It was a very clean lap. It was a bit wiggly in parts, but it was clean up until that point, Matty.
It was a great shame to see that happen to him. I thought he was going to hang on to it and slide it all the way around that corner, initial D style, but these cars are very hard to handle. So he does cross the line with a lap time of a 1 minute 53.321. And now, in an attempt to better that, is Rody, who we haven't really seen starting this far up in qualifying at all, really. He's normally finished practice sessions at the bottom of the field as he gets to grips with the circuits that we visit. But he's gotten a little bit more comfortable with this Ford Capri now, and it looks like he's got a better grip of this track than Roadhog did before. Looking pretty neat and tidy, looking pretty speedy as well in comparison. So let's see how Rody goes, Stairs.
Yeah, his best qualifying of the championship so far came in Montreal, and Holoham actually finished 9th in both of those qualifying sessions. So those were both rounds that were beset with a lot of non-finishes in qualifying, and he managed to finish a little bit higher up the order by virtue of setting a lap. It's a good strategy to employ if you're not that confident in your car, and it will certainly get in positions today if he's able to replicate that feat. because of what we've just seen with Roadhog spinning off at the final corner, just getting a couple of wheels on the grass. As we detailed during the practice session, these curbs are very, very slippery. The grass is also very, very slippery, so keep your car within the confines of those two white lines and you should be all right.
Yeah, we've seen track cuts be a big problem at some of these circuits that have a lot of concrete runoff in tricky spots, such as Montreal, as we touched on earlier, and a few of the other locations. This is pure grass all the way around next to the circuit, and of course, those curbs are very good features at deterring you from getting close to the edges of the track. As you can see there, he's got a lot of air off that penultimate bend there. It's not ruined his lap compared to what Roadhog unfortunately did in the final bend. Let's see if Roadie can keep it together. Get it all the way around there. Yes, he has. It looks like at this rate, he will be up on Roadhog's time. Comes down a very short straight, crosses the line. It's 1 minute 50.811. He's 2.5 seconds up on Roadhog's time.
That he is, and now we turn our attention to the first of the two main force racing cars. This one driven by Pablo. It looks as though Bang has not made it back in time for qualifying, as he would have been already on track, I believe, unless they're allowing him a time later on, as it appears he's only just joined the server recently, as he didn't actually have a time at the end of the practice session, as he left it earlier on before our broadcast started. So he'll either get another lap later on, or he will just start from the back.
Yeah, this is his teammate now, Pablo, in the main force racing car, the Mad Max Interceptor style car. That's making its way around now on the outlap, going through those S's bends, as I talked about. No, he's going through the box corner. I'm very late on the timing screen, unfortunately. The car is about 20 seconds back on my timing screen. It is on the real-life track. But Pablo is now rounding the final bend, going onto the start-finish grid. He's going to cross the line very soon now to start his flying lap in the Ford Capri. Let's see what he can do in comparison to Rhodey, who's piloting that same car.
Down into turn one, hit the anchors hard, turn it in, and a lot of turning, almost 180 degrees, but not quite, through the Mollycote bend up to turn two, which is named after Carlos Pache, a Brazilian legend. And a late apex there for Pablo, carrying all the speed. Doesn't actually hit the apex there, but probably not too much of an issue because it is one of those corners where you just carry the speed, and he's 1.3 seconds up on the time set by Rhodey to the first sector split.
A lot of parallels in turn 2 and 3 at this circuit. To turn 2 and 3 at Phillip Island, I find. You got that long sweeping left-handed 180-degree bend in Carlos Pache, and of course the Southern Loop, leading into a very fast left-hand kink, the Stoner corner, or as it's known as here, Suspiro, as he leads down towards the back straight now. And there's no straights at Phillip Island that are this long, and I think that's where the comparisons end, of course. And this track in comparison is also a very, very flat circuit. And there are good brake markers here, though. There's signs that are elevated off the side of the track. So we had a few issues with tracks in the past where the brake markers were dictated just by foam boards, as Pablo goes 2.2 seconds up. So those foam boards that can be knocked off by cars going wayward off the side of the circuit and spearing through the grass are not as much of an issue here. Although there's not a huge amount of landmarks all the way around here. You can see some signs on the side of the track, but for the most part, you've just got to get a feel for where everything is based on the rubber on the circuit and what landmarks you do have. So he's just going through the second last corner now, looking pretty good so far. Pablo's jumping on the brakes now into the final corner, and we'll have to see what sort of time he can do past that very tricky pit lane entry that we'll see getting used quite a bit during the race. Comes across the line now. It's a 1 minute 47.862, almost 3 seconds up on Rhodey's time.
That was a terrific lap there from Pablo, and sets down a new benchmark for Brenton Foley, who you saw in the back of shot during Pablo's lap, warming up, even down the back straight, trying to lose control of the car, it seems, but that's just the way that he drives, as he gets a wheel on the grass there and holds onto it. It's always a show with Brenton Foley. Back on your point, Matty, about the brake markers and all that sort of stuff, it's remarkable actually how these drivers are very, very adaptable. We saw in Hollowham very, very little reference points indeed, and once the brake marker boards were gone, there was very little for the drivers to use as a reference point. This is a circuit that is built into Automobilista, so it has a lot more detail. As Brenton Foley loops it out of the hairpin, and that has put end to what was looking like a very, very promising lap indeed. 0.8 of a second he was up through the first sector split, but it all got away from him through turn 5. Such a costly error.
He's going to keep plugging away at his lap, though, because there's every chance that guys in front of him are going to make similar, if not worse, mistakes. So he could find himself inheriting spots on the grid purely on that basis. Although he has locked a brake into the Sul corner, he's just pulled it up on the very edge of that circuit, but he's still getting sideways all the way around this track, and he says that's just how he drives. He doesn't try to be too showy during the qualifying lap, but that's just what's happened. Oh, he's very sideways there. I'd say he's lost a lot of grip on those rear tyres as a result of that big spin.
It was 8 seconds down through the middle sector, so he's got to find about 3 seconds to finish ahead of Roadhog.
Yeah, that's not looking very fast at all. Just the amount of sideways action he's getting at the moment. Yeah, he's just drifting through each of these corners, and he's got to be losing time off that for sure. He will post a time, of course, which is great to see him come all the way around and finish that lap time as he goes properly sideways. No, he's rotated it again. Maybe he's just not too happy with his qualifying lap now, not too stressed about it, just pushing the limits of the car for the sake of pushing those limits. It'll be a 2-minute .1202, and that is the worst time we've seen so far as a result of those 2 mistakes. And that just goes to show that Brenton Foley, of all people, can really make a few errors around this track. Goofball is crossing the line to start his lap now, and he's normally been a qualifying specialist in past seasons of ARW, but he was saying in the group chat earlier that he's not expecting too much from himself in this session. Let's just see if he's verbally sandbagging or if he really is going to struggle in the BMW 320.
I think it's a bit of both. He is the man under pressure because he's leading the championship, so he is a marked man. Everyone's trying to catch up to him, and I think he maybe is just feeling that a little bit, trying to downplay his prospects, up by 1.1 seconds through the first sector, so that's pretty good. But we have seen a lot of guys ahead of him make mistakes. So Goofball Antics will just want a clean night. It's not expected to be a track that favours the BMW 320 too much. I think what he wants to do is not bleed too many points to Ziras, because Ziras is the man who's, although 20 points behind him, if a few cars finish in between Goofball and Ziras, then it becomes a lot more possible for Ziras to overtake him in the final round, which is set to favour the BMW 320s being a street circuit. And of course, this is also an opportunity for Sam Smith to claw back some points. 3 seconds now to the good for Goofball Antics through the second sector split. It is a very, very nice lap so far.
Yeah, great margin so far from Goofball over Pablo's time. Let's see what he can do once the rest of the field starts crossing the line. Of course, Goofball starting this far down in proceedings due to the fact that he wasn't able to get fully rubbered into the circuit during the practice session, but he really looks to have got a good grasp on it now. And it'll be very interesting to see how Ziras does in comparison. Of course, both those guys driving a BMW 320. Goofball now rounds the final corner, looking to get his championship campaign off on the right track here at this circuit. It's a 1 minute 43.101. 4.7 seconds faster than anything we've seen so far in this session. Great lap from Goofball.
Yeah, that was
Meanwhile, Nether's run off the track on the exit of the final corner on his out lap. Sorry to interrupt you there, Stairs, but that's going to cut into his start time on this front straight quite dearly. He'll be making up a lot of that time on the back straight, though, given he is steering a Porsche 935.
Yeah, very costly place to have an error. Even though you're not on the timed lap yet, it is going to hurt your exit speed onto that start-finish straight. But Nether hasn't made any further errors since then. Through the first sector split, he is about to come in a few short seconds, and Goofball Antics' time is the one to beat, and he's 0.7 of a second down. Not expected, though, to be the strength of the Porsche 935 Turbo that first sector. He will claw some of that back in the second sector, you would think.
Yeah, there's a few long corners where the Porsche 935 struggles to lug its weight all the way around. Of course, the BMW 320 has an advantage.
Oh,
and that's not carrying very much. Oh, he's cooked it on the run into the final straight there. That's not going to be very good at all. That's the place where you don't want to do that in these Porsche 935s, because you're going to lose buckets and buckets of time down that back straight, and he's going to be well down the starting order for this race.
I think Goofball Antics might have been sandbagging just a little bit in that practice session, because he went a full second faster in this qualifying session than his fastest time managed in practice. So he either found something in that qualifying session, or he was just holding something back a little bit in practice to try and lull his competitors into a false sense of security.
A little bit of mind games at play. Always important to see that you're not just good on the track, but you're also good at getting inside your opponent's heads and making sure you have that advantage on them as well. Nether just mounting the curb there on the penultimate corner, as we've seen Rody as well do, and probably won't be seeing the last of that throughout this race event. as he has a big lock up into the final corner. He'll be putting a lap on the board, and it'll probably be faster than what Brenton Foley managed, but he'll still be quite some way down the order. It is a 1 minute 51.794, and that puts him provisionally fourth.
Big gaps we're seeing in this qualifying session. It's actually quite surprising that we've had 6 runners already, 18 seconds separating them, and nearly 5 seconds between first and second as we join Madbird for his qualifying lap. Let's see what he can do.
Yeah, Madbird was having a bit of a rough go at it during the practice session. Wasn't feeling too comfortable about the track. Hopefully he's got himself planted now through some of these corners, and hopefully he's got a good grasp on how this circuit really handles, because it is a bit of a tricky one, as we've been finding. Tips it in a little bit too much through that turn 3 there, but he's kept it together so far as he jumps on the anchors into the Donato bend on the run into the quick left-hand switchback of the Norte bend. Down into that final straight. He's hugging the apex all the way around that corner though, and that's one corner where you really want to be starting wide and then bringing it back in late so you can extend that straight just a little bit more. You want to try and make it as long as possible so you can get up to top speed as soon as you can. And with these Ford Capris lacking power, especially compared to the Porsche 935s, every last millisecond of acceleration time is important as he now rounds the Sul curve, gets nice and close to the apex. Great line through there so far. He'll be crossing the sector split very soon. It's a 1 minute 7.941 so far. So he's just 2/3 of a second over Goofball Antics time. So that's looking very good so far from Madbird.
Yeah, I think he'll be pretty pleased with that. 5. So Resist, as we mentioned earlier, having a very, very good qualifying run of qualifying form lately. Apart from a DNF in Montreal, circuit that caught a lot of people out. Unfortunately for him, that probably would have been a good one as well. But no worse than third in the other 3 rounds of the last 4. So Resist once again looking very, very strong. 0.4 of a second up as he comes through the second section. We apologise for the breakup in your picture. Welcome everyone to the 9th round of the DRM Championship here in Jacarepaguá in Brazil. Unfortunately, we have had some technical gremlins which have forced us to miss the qualifying session, which means we're going to go straight into the race itself. One-shot qualifying pole position was taken by Sam Smith. So many congratulations to Sam Smith. He takes pole position ahead of Ziras. My name is Stairs. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Maddie to the commentary box after what has been a trying night so far, hasn't it, Maddie?
It certainly has, for not just us in the commentary booth here trying to figure out our technical gremlins, but for the drivers as well. We've seen a few of these drivers making errors during that qualifying session, and now the grid that shaped up as a result is taking off from the grid to start the formation lap. So let's go through the grid positions based on qualifying results. Sam Smith, as you mentioned just before, starts on pole position in the Porsche 935. Black Schuppen-Rennen flying the flag for that team with the absence of Birdo. Ahead of Ziras on the grid, who starts from second position, a gap of 0.626 seconds behind him. Resist is third in the BMW M1, looking to continue his podium form after missing out on a bucket load of points due to his own technical issues last race. Goofball Antics, the current championship leader, starts from 4th on the grid next to Madbird, who had a great qualifying result in 5th. Pablo sits in 6th position, one of his best qualifying results so far, ahead of Rody in 7th, who capitalised on fewer mistakes from some of the other drivers. Nether in 8th position, I believe he is, if I haven't lost track of my numbers. Yes, Nether is currently starting this race from 8th position, ahead of Roadhog in 9th, who had a few mistakes of his own and wasn't able to get to grip. It's Brenton Foley, who spun his car around twice, and will be starting from 10th position. It'll be very interesting to see how many spots he can make up without losing too much time if he keeps making mistakes throughout the race. Hopefully he doesn't do so. And bang for Main Force Racing is our 11th and final starter of this race, having not qualified his car and not appeared in practice. So we've got a few absences. Birdo, as I mentioned earlier, is still on his holiday and will be back for the season finale next week. We're also missing D. Samaj, Tyrrell, Greg Tara, and I believe I've forgotten somebody else. No, I think that's it, actually.
Yes, who did you say? D. Samaj, Greg Tara, Berto and of course Tyrrell. So unfortunate to have those guys not with us, but we certainly hope that they will return very shortly indeed, and we can have a big full grid. But tonight it's just the 11 of them, and an interesting race in prospect with a championship potentially up for grabs. The only man who can clinch it today is Goofball Antics, but unlikely given the disadvantage that BMW 320 has down the straight here, and also the fact that he's down in 4th place with 3 very, very quick guys ahead of him, and 2 of those guys ahead of him currently chasing him in the points.
Yeah, pit strategy is not going to play as much of a role here as it has in previous circuits. The amount of fuel that's consumed all the way around this track means the BMW 320s won't get an advantage from staying out for an extended stint. So the Porsche 935 will be able to stretch its legs down that back straight, won't lose a huge amount of time in the pit stop relative to the rest of the cars, and will probably be able to streak ahead. So my prediction for the race win is Sam Smith. What do you reckon, Stairs? Just a quick one before they finish grading up.
Yeah, well, he showed last week in Portimao that he's pretty good and was able to win on a track like that. But here we go. It's Jacarepaguá. The lights are green. A couple of them squirm off the line, and through the middle goes Resist to take second place away from Sam Smith as Ziras goes through into the lead, and Goofball Antics goes around the outside of Sam Smith. That is a terrific start from Goofball Antics, but a terrible one for Sam Smith, down 4 spots. He fights back though around the outside of the Carlos Pache corner, and he reclaims the final spot on the podium with 54 minutes and 30 seconds remaining in this race. Right behind them, Nether getting swamped by Pablo, and the 2 Ford Capris of Madbird and Brenton Foley. A little bit of contact there, it looks like.
Madbird's pushed him right off the track. That's Pablo, who's gone straight into the tyre barrier. He may have a little bit of damage from that, but he's going to press on it, although his car looks to be missing something. No, there's been more accidents. It's Bang and Roadhog.
Let's catch a replay there of what happened between Bang and Roadhog. And here they are coming to the end of the final sector, and it was Roadhog. Just trying to see, it's a bit difficult from this score. Was that Pablo rejoining? No, that was independent. Oh, Bang spun on his own, and Roadhog was the unfortunate man who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So drama there in the early laps. Now we've got Resist already under pressure from Sam Smith right up the back end of that BMW M1, with Ziras just half a second up the road.
Yeah, it's going to be a great battle at the front of this field in the early stages of this race as these cars bring themselves back into contention. On paper, the Porsche 935 should be the quickest car around this track, followed by the BMW M1, and then anything else that can be dared to stay behind it. But Ziras had a fantastic qualifying time. As we saw, he qualified in 2nd position, of course, in what is a vastly underpowered car around this circuit. That back straight really takes that lap time out. It's a full 30 kilometers an hour difference between the top speeds of the Porsche 935 and that BMW 320 as Goofball Antics runs off the road, clips the tyre barrier and hits the fence.
Oh no, that's disastrous there for Goofball Antics. He's dropped all the way down to 7th place. Let's hope that wasn't too much damage for the championship leader. Catching the replay now of Goofball Antics. He got 2 wheels on the grass on the inside, and did he manage to keep it out of the fence? No, he didn't. He clipped his rear left quarter panel with the wall, and hopefully that doesn't cause him too much damage. He's got a lot of work to do now, especially with his closest championship rivals currently in 1st and 3rd place. This is looking very, very good for Ziras right now, but he's coming under a fair bit of pressure from those behind him.
Meanwhile, Resist is coming under a mountain of pressure from Sam Smith there, having to drive very defensively through the Norte corner there, wearing his tyres out a little bit, getting the car a little bit sideways, just trying to take up as much room as he possibly could. And he can't keep doing that throughout the rest of this race, or he's going to be losing a lot of rubber off those tyres, and he's not going to be performing the way he should be around this track. He's going to be losing a lot of grip and henceforth a lot of speed, and Sam Smith is looking for every single opportunity he can to try and get past his BMW M1. They're coming down to the penultimate corner now. He's a little bit too far back at the moment, so they're still the way they were, but the Resist has gone off into the dirt. Sam Smith's going to have a look around the outside. He reckons there's a chance here. He might almost get it done. They're side by side, and Sam Smith is through at the final corner. Let's see if it continues on the way onto the main straight, and yes, it does. So Ziras still leads by a margin of about 2 seconds or so, and Sam Smith has now inherited 2nd place as a result of that error as Brenton Foley runs off the track in the background. Doesn't lose a huge amount of time, though, and he's up 5 places already from the start of this race into 5th, and he's resuming his usual season-long battle with Madbird.
We've already had one retirement in this race. That was Rhodey, who retired off screen. We didn't actually see what caused that. So commiserations to Rhodey. He did a fair bit of the race last week on 3 tyres. Still got points, but it was discussed after the race that that shouldn't have been allowed. And so now, henceforth, if anyone were to lose a wheel, that constitutes an immediate retirement from the race. If you have already completed 75% of the race to that point, then you will collect points. But if not, then unfortunately you are out of luck.
Rhodey unfortunately got his braking marker all wrong in the penultimate corner there on the second lap of the race. Shot right across the gravel trap and went headfirst into the fence. Ripped the front assembly off the right-hand side of that suspension. And as a result of those rules, was unable to continue. And of course, if you're only 2 laps in, you've already lost a wheel. I'd say it's curtains for the rest of your race. Ziras having a bit of a lock-up there, mounting the curbs as well. Meanwhile, at the front of the grid, of course, and he's lost a bit of time, very wobbly. Sam Smith, of course, having a couple of woes of his own, mind you, so he's not able to get past him just yet. But that gap is all the way down to 0.7 of a second, and at this point, physically, space speaking, it's pretty much negligible, and it's just down to what part of the track they're on. So Sam Smith is really sizing up an opportunity to get past already.
Continuation, this is, of the battle they had in Portimao, which raged on for many laps, and in the end was decided by the different strategies that they both decided to employ, as Sam Smith sets the fastest lap of the race, 141.7, and as far as I'm aware, the first man to set a lap in the 41s during this race, with Ziras in the 42s, and Ziras already forced to go defensive into turn 1, so Sam has found his rhythm.
It's only a matter of time before Sam is able to get past Ziras and into the lead, and he'll be pushing for even quicker lap times. We saw at the last outing at the Portimao circuit, once Sam Smith got in front, he was setting fastest lap after fastest lap, putting in some incredible times just to gap the field at the front there. And it's really something that Sam Smith can do. Once he gets into a good rhythm for a circuit, and once he gets a good feel for it, he can really just streak away at the front. He does have a gap of 0.7 at the moment down the back straight, so he must have lost a bit of time through that first sector. He's going to have a look. He's going to have a big lunge into that final corner now. And he's going to, is he going to run a little bit hot? No, he keeps it to the apex. Very good pass there. But Ziras is sitting on the outside of him through the sul curve, but he's not going to be able to get much done. So Sam Smith has a great pass through that corner off the back straight there, and is now into the lead of the race.
Fantastic job there for Sam Smith. That is exactly what he needs to do for his championship bid. He's aiming to claw points back on Goofball Antics. Ziras, though, certainly wants to spoil that party, but given that Sam Smith potentially will be at a disadvantage in the tricky street circuit of Salvador for the final round, he wants to build his advantage as much as he possibly can, and this is very much the opportunity for him to do so and make hay while the sun shines.
Ziras was still glued to the back bumper of Sam Smith's Porsche 935 there, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it very well could. If Sam Smith makes a mistake in the very late stages of this race, that could be a spot for Ziras to get in front, and if he's able to drive defensively, he could stay in front there as well.
Bit of a moment there for Ziras onto the grass. That was what his brother Resist did a few laps ago, which allowed Sam Smith to get past him at that time, and it just goes to show how treacherous those curbs are. You've just got to get out of the throttle. They're so slippery. Resist has got the pace potentially to put Ziras under some pressure tonight if he fights back. Bit of a stock take on what's going on in the rest of the field. Nether is currently in 4th place, ahead of the fast-starting Brenton Foley, as we mentioned, up 5 spots. What a terrific race he's had up to this point. Madbird sits 2 seconds adrift of him and has lost 1 position from where he started this race. Goofball Antics has got an awful lot of work to do after having that off at turn 1 a few laps ago, down there in 7th place, 3 spots down from where he started, but of course he does have the advantage of the shorter pit stop that BMW 320 is able to do. Pablo is in 8th place, ahead of his teammate Bang by 15 seconds, and Roadhog is 4 seconds behind him. The last man on track with Rhodey, our only retirement thus far.
Yeah, it was a nightmare start for Goofball Antics in the first few laps of this race, having lost a lot of time, a lot of positions. As it stands at the moment, he's 19 seconds off the lead of this race, and that's not where he wants to be if he wants to protect his championship lead. Sam Smith is currently sitting in the lead, and he's only 10 points behind in the championship. So if things finish the way they are, I'm not sure what the finishing position is for 7th. It is 9 points. So Sam Smith will easily take the lead of the championship if things stay the way they are. Goofball Antics, though, don't count him out. He will be able to press up, and he will be able to finish strongly, I believe, although this track is not very well suited to the BMW 320s. So he's definitely got his work cut out for him.
That's right. So another fastest lap for Sam Smith on the previous lap, 141.7. And the fastest final sector, though, belongs to Ziras, which he set on the previous lap. So that is certainly where the BMW can claw back a little bit, but it's just unfortunate for him that that straight is so very long. It allows the Porsche to get away just a little bit.
849 horsepower behind that Porsche 935 driver's seat there, sitting over the rear axle. So it's a momentous amount of horsepower that Porsche has to play with, and it really is able to show how much it means down that back straight to have that much power. So that Porsche 935 is already pulling a huge gap on Ziras. Not as big as some of the gaps we've seen in previous races, but big enough still, because Sam Smith, of course, did lose 3 spots off the start, but he's able to make them up in swift succession. So it's starting to thin out just a little bit at the front. There's a close gap, or it's starting to close up between Resist and Ziras. The gap there is about 5 seconds, mind you. It actually seems to be opening up a little bit, so Ziras is still performing.
Oh, sorry, Brenton Foley's just got on the grass. He's got onto the curb. He's had a huge moment that he's somehow managed to hold on to. Madbird in that moment closed up quite a lot, and that's now the closest battle on the racetrack, I believe, well under a second.
Yeah, Brenton Foley, of course, has a history in these past few races of making a few unfortunate errors in battles where he should have been really leading and making his way up. His best finish so far this season is a 4th position only, which he got at the last race out in Portimao and also at Montreal. So he hasn't been able to finish super strongly.
Ooh.
And it really has a big slide out of one of those corners there. It's really not reflective of how good a driver he really is, as Madbird has a big slide as well. So those two guys in those white Ford Capris are facing very similar woes at the moment.
Yeah, just 10 minutes into this race, and they're already pushing their tyres to the limit. And I wonder how much longer before those tyres have screamed enough and give up on them. We will find out. It's interesting, a comment Sam Smith made after winning the race last week in Portimao was that when those tyres do start to give up, it doesn't matter how much he's too careful or pushes, that's when the spins come, and that's what we saw last race. It was an incredibly roller coaster run for Sam Smith, which ended in him taking victory quite comfortably in the end by about 4 or 5 seconds from Ziras, but it certainly didn't look like it would be that comfortable in the early stages when he would try and build a gap, he would spin, and then he would catch back up, try and build a gap again. It was a very, very up and down race for him.
Yeah, there's a very small amount of aerodynamic grip on these old late 70s, early 80s race cars. So it almost is exclusively mechanical grip that you have to rely on. And of course, that relies on having a good set of rubber between the vehicle and the pavement. So if your tires are completely worn to the wires, then that's going to translate into no grip at all for you. You're going to be spinning all over the place, as we saw a few of those guys doing in the later stages of that race. And of course, in the later stages of most of the races here. Something to keep in mind of is the pit stops and how they work here. So you can't take tires very quickly at all. You can take them at the same time as you're taking fuel, but if you're just getting a quick splash of fuel, it may not be worth taking tires.
Because Foley's off. Sorry to cut across you there. Foley went off onto the grass and has somehow managed to avoid a disastrous incident while rejoining the racetrack. He was clear by a few seconds. He eked that gap back out, and then it's all the way back down to 6/10. So this always seems to happen when you're trying to explain something, as you were, Matty.
So yeah, to take 2 tyres, you can only take 2 tyres at once during a pit stop. And to take 2 tyres is 27 seconds. So it's almost a full minute. 54 seconds, I think. 54 seconds to take 2 sets of tyres. So yeah, to take a full set of 4 tyres. So it's almost never worth it, I don't think. You might see a few guys, especially in the Porsche 935s and the BMW M1s, taking a set of rears, or maybe a set of fronts if there's a lot of heavy braking and hard turning zones around this circuit, just to be able to get some more freshness into that vehicle to make sure it can last all the way to the end and be a little bit more predictable with the handling. But unless you're having a big stop to repair damage or something like that, it's not worth taking 4 tyres. So you really have to conserve the rubber all the way around here.
Just looking on a replay to see whether Nether has made a mistake, which it doesn't look like he has, but those 2 Ford Capris are starting to close him down just a little bit. They're only 2 seconds adrift, and if they don't battle each other too much, they will start to close that gap, because the times set by Nether at the moment, they're about 2 seconds slower than that set by Brenton Foley and Madbird. But of course we know that it's a very inconsistent run from Brenton Foley, especially in these DRM cars. He's very, very quick, but not over 2 laps. Over 1 lap, yes, but he just makes a lot of little errors here and there because he drives very, very close to that limit, and he, to be fair, knows no other way. Served him very, very well in the Caterhams, which forgave him for such indiscretions, but the DRMs swap ends on you very, very quickly indeed, and Madbird can sense that 5th place and potentially 4th place if all goes his way tonight.
Yeah, Madbird, if he's a smart driver, he will sit behind and just wait for Brenton Foley to make a slip-up or an error at one of these corners, because Madbird is driving a very clean race so far, but a couple of brief slides and lockups that we've seen so far around here, he's able to relatively match pace with Brenton Foley. So if he's able to just get past by virtue of Brenton Foley sliding off the side of the track and losing a lot of time there, Madbird will be able to stick in front, and he may even be able to lead that train of Ford Capris, all 2 of those Ford Capris, up into the rear of Nether's Porsche 935 and potentially make that a race for 4th position, as Brenton Foley has another big lockup there into the box curve. And
interestingly, Goofball Antics a few seconds behind these guys. His lap times are not particularly impressive. They're fairly similar to these 2 Ford Capris, so he's not eating into that gap at all. I do wonder if he's trying to save a bit of fuel. Ziras did say prior to the race getting underway that it was a very thirsty circuit, so I didn't anticipate there being any no-stoppers, but well, we saw in Portimao last week that Goofball Antics was able to make the no-stop strategy work for him, and that got him 3rd place. I wonder if he's hoping to jump Madbird, Brenton Foley and Nether by virtue of not making a pit stop. Resist, Ziras and Sam Smith, I think, are probably a little bit too far up the road for Goofball to be too worried about right now.
If there's anyone who can conserve the resources of their vehicle to make it last as long as possible, it is definitely Goofball Antics. He really knows how to get the most out of that car, as we saw evidence last time out, where he completed a successful no-stop race and was able to finish in 3rd position as well. So it was a great result for him. But this circuit here is a lot like Sebring. There's a lot of high-speed, full-throttle sections, including some of the corners. So I don't think it's going to be possible for any of these cars, especially the BMW 320s, to be able to put together a no-stop race as Madbird makes a bit of contact with the rear bumper of Brenton Foley there. So Madbird just gently letting Foley know that he means business and he wants to get past that PBF Send It Stairs Noises car as soon as he possibly can. Big slide there from Foley. Somehow is able to collect it through the Lagoa corner there, and they're all over the back of Nether somehow still. So they're still making up ground on that Porsche 935 as Goofball takes to the dirt just a little bit behind them there. Hasn't lost a huge amount of time, but Brenton Foley is slipping and sliding all over the place.
Yeah, every single time that he has one of those big slides, Madbird must be rubbing his hands together with glee, thinking, beauty, another position, as Madbird has a bit of a excursion onto the grass himself, which will put Goofball Antics firmly in his rear vision mirror. But Brenton Foley tends to save a lot of those slides, which must be an endless sense of disappointment for Madbird.
Yeah, and Madbird's almost trying to emulate what Brenton Foley was doing there. Had a big moment on the exit of the final turn there and has lost a huge amount of time. It's now down to 2 seconds as the margin between those Ford Capris. So Madbird will have to just keep pressing along and try and keep his laps nice and tidy, because there is still a chance for Brenton Foley to make another error just yet. So Madbird is not out of that battle for the mid-pack positions at this stage. Now Goofball is almost involved, given that his gap is only about 1.6 seconds to Madbird in front of him.
Live championship standings as they are right now, with Goofball Antics in 7th place and Sam Smith leading the race. He would take the lead of the championship from Goofball Antics with Sam, 160 points to 154. So even though if Goofball Antics were to finish 7th, and I'd be very, very surprised if it does end that way, he would still be very, very much in this championship hunt with 6 points deficit to Sam Smith. That could very easily be overhauled in the final race in the Circuito Ayrton Senna in Salvador.
Absolutely, it's a very narrow circuit, that one, almost akin to a street circuit, so it's going to suit these BMW 320s majestically. They're going to be almost built for that circuit, so if there's anywhere that Goofball is going to be able to reclaim that championship lead, it's going to be at the Salvador circuit, but he has run off the track there and lost a bit of time to Madbird in front of him, so that gap has widened just a little bit, and it's going to make his race just that little bit tougher, at least until the pit stops roll around. Yeah,
he's got to stay with this group and hope that he can jump them in the pit stops, because that will net him 3 positions, put him up into 4th, assuming that he's not still targeting Resist, who's on a lot. Oh, good a pace there. Bretton Foley spins it round and somehow still rejoins ahead of Madbird, but Madbird has the momentum and slots through into 5th place. Bretton Foley is demoted a spot, so that was a bit of a gift there for Madbird, but Foley is right behind him and will be looking to fight back quickly.
Brenton Foley did very well to keep that car off the fences there and rotated exactly 360 degrees, didn't get it backwards on the circuit, didn't even bring out so much as the yellow flag. Business as usual as far as the stewards are concerned, although he's lost a little bit of rubber off those tyres, and of course he has lost a position to Madbird, but it's now very close between those two, just under a second as they go down the back straight. Brenton Foley will be getting a very slight amount of draft, not enough to be anywhere near consequential, I'm afraid. So Madbird is still ahead. He won't have a chance for Brenton Foley to jump on the brakes and try and sneak up the inside just yet, but we'll have to see how well Brenton Foley is able to keep pressing on as Roadhog goes off the track behind them, who is now lap traffic. Roadhog's having a shocker of a race, isn't he?
Yeah, he obviously doesn't like this racetrack at all. He did struggle in practice, and that is certainly coming to bear in the race itself. Bit of a stock take now as we're approaching 20 minutes. Well, we've just passed the 20-minute mark of the race, and Sam Smith still leading by about 7.5 seconds now from Ziras, pulling out around about 0.5 of a second, up to 0.8 of a second per lap on Ziras, and that is looking very, very good indeed for Ziras as Brenton Foley gets an almighty swapper coming out of the final corner.
Sorry to stop, but Sam Smith's had the same fate. Sam Smith's had a big moment as well, so the gap between him and Ziras is now down to 2 seconds.
Oh, so I just gave him the commentators because he was basically not on our radar for the longest time. I just said he was doing a sublime job, and what does he do? He carries way too much speed in there, and he'll have some very badly flat-spotted tyres there. I wonder if that will affect his strategy decisions in this race, but now you can see the top 3 all in the same picture.
Yeah, very close running now. So that unfortunate mistake from Sam Smith has now brought Ziras almost back into contention for the race victory. We'll, of course, have to see how this race pans out over the next 33 minutes. Anything can happen, mind you. And if Sam Smith is able to keep driving consistently, he might be able to scrape a win here. But it's looking like it could go either way at the moment.
Yeah, Sam Smith, it's really an important race for him because the smart money is not on the Porsche 935 turbos in the final round, considering how thirsty they are. Track position will be key, and they will need to make a pit stop there. And the BMWs, we believe, won't. So that was the case in Belle Isle. That is the form book for us, and that is what we're using. So 1.5 seconds now the margin. That has been eroded on the final lap by 6 seconds with that big spin from Sam Smith. Resist is 8 seconds behind in 3rd place, and that battle for 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th a little bit further behind, still raging on.
Yeah, Sam Smith lost a full 7 seconds off what was his best lap time so far. So he's lost a huge chunk of time to Ziras there. And we seem to have a battle a bit further back now between Roadhog and Bang, who both had off-track excursions of their own, and as a result are now pretty evenly matched in terms of track position. So that's going to be a pretty grand scrap between those two, as Bang misses the apex a little bit there through the final corner. But it is still Sam Smith ahead, and the gap's gone down to 1.2 seconds as a result of going through that first sector where that BMW 320 can really claw back a deficit.
A lot of points on offer actually for Roadhog and Bang, even though they're a lap down already with 30 minutes remaining in this race. Considering a slightly smaller field than we are used to in recent rounds, only 11 starters, and Roadie DNFing in the early stages, there are still thick end of, well, 6 points for the guy who comes 10th, and north of that for anyone who finishes further up the grid. So Roadhog and Bang are still in a fight that is very much worth fighting for.
Yeah, if Bang is able to bring the car home in 10th position, he will record his best finish of the season so far, and only his second finish of the season so far. The only race where he's been able to score any points was at Sebring, the third race of the season. So that is a long time ago, and that was 13th place, so only 3 points on the board so far for Bang. If he's able to finish 10th here, that'll be an extra 6, so that'll be a nice little points haul for him if he's able to do that.
Right, Madbird and Foley are back at it, with Madbird still leading Brett and Foley after Foley made a few errors earlier on in this race, and Foley fighting back because he certainly is looking racy tonight. This is letting Nether off the hook now. He's about 3 seconds up the road from these two, and they had closed in to much closer than that. They did have him basically in the same shot, but now Nether's cleared off a little bit, and Goofball Antics is still lingering in the background, but the focus is very much on these two Ford Capris.
Yeah, these two are going to be having a great scrap again as usual if neither of them make a mistake. So hopefully these two can keep the noses pointed in the right direction and keep all four wheels on the tarmac and provide some fantastic racing action for us as they take some pretty interesting lines around this circuit. One of the great things about this series is it brings together a ton of drivers with all sorts of different skill levels and all sorts of different styles and how they drive these cars. And of course, with the cars being so different themselves, we get some very strange battles between some of these vehicles that really wouldn't exist in real life, because you'd find these drivers would be optimizing these vehicles to the maximum of their grip capabilities and whatnot. But the big mix of different styles and cars here means we can see some very interesting matchups, can't we, Stairs?
We certainly can, and this is very, very important for their battle in the championship as well, with Madbird in 5th place. If he finishes ahead of Brenton Foley, that reduces the damage that he sees in the points championship. It would bring him up over 100 points, and he needs to limit that damage with Resist currently up in a podium position. Although he's not in a position to overtake Madbird right now in the points, he will eat away at the advantage, and that would be 91 points to Resist if he finishes 3rd. So 10 points separating them as they go into the final round as Madbird comes into the pit. So he is the first to pull the trigger in his Ford Capri, and this is a circuit where there is a very, very fast pit lane speed limit. It's up around 200 kilometers an hour if I'm not mistaken, so that does make a difference here, and let's see if the others react.
So Goofball Antics inherits 6th position as a result of that pit stop from Madbird. How long he can maintain that for is going to be another question, given how long he can make that fuel last in that car, of course. But yeah, fuel strategy is going to be very crucial here to see how it plays out, because of course Madbird being the first car into the pits there is going to mix things up a little bit. That's going to make a few of the other guys think on their feet just a little bit. Going to make Brenton Foley consider how much further he can go on his current fuel and his tyres, see how long he can make that last, whether he can leapfrog anyone in the pit lane as well, especially Madbird. We'll have to see where they both come out once they've both pitted. So it's going to be a story that plays out over quite some time, but we have reached just about half race distance now, so we should start seeing the rest of the cars coming to the pits very shortly. Yeah,
it is a good time to make pit stops, so we'll look for those in the coming laps, and certainly very interested to see whether Brenton Foley reacts to that straight away, or whether he tries to stretch this first stint just that little bit longer. What's the gap between the leaders? Sam Smith and Ziras, 1.3 seconds separate them. They're not electing to pit on this lap as they go around for another occasion, and Resist follows them, staying on the racetrack as well as we look towards Nether. Let's see if Nether comes in. Bit of a lock up there, very close to an off track. Had his two right-hand wheels over onto the grass. He also neglects the pit lane, and so too Foley. So no one taking the bait straight up.
So it looks like everyone's still staying out as it stands at the moment, and it's interesting to see that the gap at the front hasn't really grown very much. So Sam Smith hasn't been able to put a huge amount of time on Ziras behind him. So maybe his tyres are completely stuffed and he's not able to get as much pace as that BMW 320.
Yeah, he lost time to Ziras on the previous lap, 0.7 of a second, in fact.
Maybe he made another error somewhere that we unfortunately missed on our broadcast. But this is where he's able to eke out a big margin. He's already up to 2.5 seconds down this back straight. doesn't get up to 320 kilometers an hour, mind you, so maybe he's not able to carry as much speed through that initial corner, through that Norte bend, just on the run to the back straight, because he's lost 20 Ks off his top speed, and that's going to be crucial for his race pace.
Certainly is going to be crucial. Well, it's very hard to call. We thought this was going to be potentially Sam Smith's for the taking after he eked out a lead of 7 seconds. Now it's a lot less than that. 1 second, in fact, with Sam Smith just struggling a little bit in the last few moments. 1:43 on the previous lap is much, much slower. As we've got a yellow flag, we're just seeing if that turns into a safety car.
In the pits now.
It's just a local yellow, so the yellow is cleared as Pablo becomes the second man to make his pit stop.
Oh, a big slide from Brenton Foley. Or just watching him on one of the camera angles from various points around the circuit. So his tyres must be on the way out, surely. We'll have to see. Resist now comes into the pits as well.
So Resist, the first of the top three to react, and that BMW M1 is very thirsty, so...
Oh, Nether's in the pits as well after he had a massive two-wheel moment in the penultimate corner, and he's run off the exit of the pit lane entry into the grass. He's lost a bit of time off his pit stop as a result. Goofball Antics stays out, as we expect him to do, but so does Brenton Foley. So Foley and Goofball Antics both stay out, and it's Resist and Nether who currently sit in the pit lane.
Yeah, that was a big moment there for Nether on the pit entry and the pit exit, as you say. There's the final corner before the pit entry and the pit entry itself. So dangerous times there for the Porsche 935 Turbo. Probably didn't lose too much time though, because those corners aren't preceded by massive straights. So it's all starting to shake out.
Just notice Pablo, who was in the pit lane just before, cut right across the exit painted lines on the tarmac there, which present a very slow chicane on the exit of pit lane there, as we'll see Nether go through shortly. And I don't know if that constitutes a track cut, so that might be something to keep an eye out for.
Now, Nether, if I recall correctly, took all 4 tyres last week in Portimao, so let's see whether he does that this time. But let's turn our attention now to the race leader, Sam Smith, who is coming into the pit lane, a very crucial pit stop in this race.
So he'll be taking as little fuel as he possibly can, and Sam Smith has made errors in judgments of his fuel in previous races, so that could prove to be very costly. Of course, he drops down to second position almost immediately, given how close Ziras was to him, and Ziras will now be in clean air trying to get as much of a gap time as he can on that Porsche 935 when he's not behind in the theoretical race. Meanwhile, in third and fourth, Brenton Foley and Goofball are very close, and there's almost contact at the penultimate corner there. Of course, neither of those guys haven't yet pitted, so Brenton Foley must have made a big error, although Foley is now coming into the pits while Goofball stays out. So Goofball will inherit second position as a result of these pit stops, while Sam Smith still sits in the lane.
Well, you're right, he must have made a big mistake. Looking at his times, it was the middle sector where he was about 2 seconds slower than everyone around him. So that suggests to me that Foley had a big moment in that middle sector, as Sam Smith rejoins the racetrack behind Resist, and that's very interesting.
It is, so that must pay dividends to either Sam Smith making continued errors, not being able to make up much time after that spin earlier, or just spending a lot of time in the pit lane. So now he's stuck behind Resist, which is very interesting. The gap that Ziras has now to the next car is 48 whole seconds, and that gap is to Goofball Antics. Both of those BMW 320s yet to pit. Of course, this is a very familiar story, but the gap to Ziras down to Resist is 59 seconds. So Ziras hasn't even pitted at all yet, and he already has a free stop.
Well, before the pit stops, the lead that Sam Smith had over Resist was something like 8 seconds. So he's lost 8 seconds in the pit stop phase. Has he made another big strategical blunder? And we wait to see what type of pit stop Ziras has, but one would think that it could be a lot shorter than Sam Smith, something closer to what his brother Resist did, and that could very much put Ziras in the box seat here. Sam Smith, we know, had a lot of trouble in Hollowham trying to get past Resist, so Resist may well have played himself into a second place finish if he can hold on to that.
Yeah, potentially. It's shaping up to be a very close battle for the race win here. At the very least, these 4 cars are going to be quite evenly matched, as Goofball has a bit of a moment on the run into pit lane, keeps all 4 tyres on the tarmac, but Goofball will now come through and take a relatively early pit stop for his standards.
Right, so no stop from him. We know that very early on. Still 20 minutes remaining in this race, so he elects to take a very, very early pit stop. How short will the pit stop be? Will he be able to jump the cars that he was battling with, namely Brenton Foley, Madbird, and Nether? The engine you can hear off screen is Bang, who's also in the pits right now. Brenton Foley is in 5th place, and he's coming up to the penultimate corner right now. So I think with Goofball Antics on the move now, Goofball Antics will retain that position. And what a great job from Goofball Antics. Look at that. Foley, Nether, Madbird, all behind him.
Great stuff from Goofball. Able to make up 3 positions off that pit stop strategy. And that really shows how good the BMW 320 is on fuel and tyres, given that it's such a light car, and really around any track that's going to be a huge benefit. So he's back up to where he started now in 4th position. Those lost places from earlier completely negated, and it just makes you wonder how far up the field he could be had he not made that unfortunate error near the start of the race.
Ziras is in the pits, race leader in the pits, so another crucial pit stop. We're getting this all decided fairly early on in the race. Resist and Sam Smith are still coming through the final sector, so Ziras, although he's in the pits now stationary, 2nd and 3rd battle is only now coming around turn 9, and they've still got 2 corners to go until they come onto the start-finish straight. So this is nervous times in this race. There are the 2nd and 3rd place drivers. Ziras is yet to move still. Is he taking all 4 tyres? It's going to be very, very interesting indeed. It may well be...
He's off to Jackson, he's away.
Oh, it's going to be very, very close. Resist will be coming down at full speed. They're coming down past what would be the commentary box window right now, and he rejoins right in between them. Ziras into 2nd place, but Sam Smith slots in behind them in 3rd. Resist leads the race. How could we possibly have got that any closer? I do not know.
Unbelievable. This is going to be a fantastic battle. I'm not sure how much longer Ziras is going to last in 2nd place, given the power deficit. Oh, he's run onto the dirt, and he's already lost that position. It happened as soon as I was saying it. So Sam Smith is already up to 2nd place, and he's going to be piling a metric ton of pressure onto the back of Resist BMW M1. How he copes is another question entirely, and it's going to be very thrilling to watch. Keep your eyes peeled for this battle for the lead, because it's going to be raging all the way to the end, if you ask me.
Absolutely. What nerves for Resist. He's got 2 of the fastest guys right behind him. I said he might throw a cat amongst the pigeons, but he's knocking on the door of his very first win here. But Sam Smith goes straight into the back of him. Unbelievable stuff for Sam Smith. He's crashed into him. What disaster for the championship hopeful. And Sam Smith, is he out of the race too? What drama. We didn't want to see this happen. It's unbelievable.
He is. He's out of the race.
Sam Smith out of the race.
Unbelievable. That no one could have predicted that at all. That's a huge incident at the back of the final straight there, and neither of those drivers are going to be very happy with what's happened there. And the result of that is Goofball Antics is now up to 2nd.
That has blown the championship wide open. Sam Smith needing to make hay today has absolutely blown it. Poor old Resist was having the best performance that we've seen, and he's had a few good performances already. Goofball Antics now up into 2nd place, which is going to be incredibly valuable for his championship prospects.
What a shame for Sam Smith and for Resist there. Very unfortunate, because both those guys could have had fantastic results, and now this championship is going to go... it's gone all over the place, hasn't it? Don't know what's really happening at the moment. Going to need to take a little bit of time to compose myself here. Ziras at the moment is 35 seconds ahead. Unbeknownst to him, all this action's been happening a very long way down the road behind him as a result, of course, of that the gap that he had to Goofball, of course. So, yeah, he would have seen the incident happen in front of him, of course. I got my gaps all wrong there. But, yeah, the BMW 320s, as a result of that, are leading the way, because the most powerful car on the grid right now is Nether's Porsche 935, which is 48 seconds off the lead. And I can't see him making up very much of that time at all with 17 minutes to go in this race. Brenton Foley, meanwhile, is in 3rd.
Yeah, Brenton Foley is looking for his first podium finish. Can you believe that? The guy who was the only man to beat Ziras in the Caterhams has been off the podium for this entire season and is knocking on the door of his first podium finish today. If he can stay where he is right now, What a disappointing way for that battle to end. It was looking like a 3-car battle royale, and unfortunately it's looking like it's going to be Ziras walking away to an unopposed victory. Not that we begrudge him that. He'll be very, very pleased indeed, but of course he won't have been pleased to see his brother smashed out of the race. I'm sure Sam Smith will be equally remorseful, but it's basically killed his championship prospects, because if Goofball finishes where he is right now, he would be 30 points clear of Sam Smith, which knocks Sam Smith out of the championship completely. No chance at all for him to claim the championship in the next round. Ziras, though, would be within 14 points, which puts him in with a shot. So it would be just two. It would just the two of them going into this final round, if it were to finish right now in the positions that they are in currently.
And then there were two, and because of that unfortunate incident, I'm not sure who was to blame yet. I haven't had a good chance to review that as the race has been progressing, of course. But it seems to me that Sam Smith has taken himself out of championship contention with that one slightly careless act, and that's going to be a big shame for him. And of course, Resist would have been looking for a fantastic result. He was leading the race at that time, of course, and now that's all for nothing. So we're down to a 7-car race now. So down from 11 cars at the start of this race. Pretty small field now, but there should still be some pretty good battles.
The most attritional race that we've had in the DRM series since the opening round in Brno, when we had 5 retirements. So 4 already, and I talked before about the fantastic prospect for points in this race for Roadhog, and Bang has also become one of those retirements in the interim. So Roadhog now, although he's last, will finish in 7th place if he doesn't make any more positions and he keeps it on the black stuff, and that will be worth a big, healthy chunk of points for him.
Yeah, that'll be worth 9 points for him, so it'll be a nice little tally to tack onto his current tally of what I believe is 65 points. So he'll be up to 74 points. And of course, Resist in front of him will not be moving at all. So Roadhog will have a chance to leapfrog Resist in the championship standings. There'll be about a point different between them once it comes to the end of this race, if that's how things stay at the moment. We'll have to see, of course, how it plays out. But Roadhog has a very big gap at the moment to the car in front. The only car that hasn't lapped him in the field so far is Pablo, who is a full minute ahead of him. So he's quite some way off the pace, not really being able to get a huge amount of pace out of that Toyo Celica around this circuit.
Still trying to come to grips with what we've witnessed. It was Goofball Antics going into this round very much under pressure. But if he finishes where he is right now, it puts him in a very, very strong position going into the final round. He wouldn't have wanted it to end that way, as downtrodden as he was going into this round. He wasn't really feeling it around this circuit. He wouldn't have wanted it to happen that way, but it certainly gives him a very, very strong chance of clinching the title next week. Madbird, incidentally, in his battle with Resist, that's something that's he won't be too worried about right now. He'll be more worried about the fact that Brenton Foley is up in 3rd place while he's down there in 5th. That's going to tighten that battle right up. They'd be tied on 101 points apiece going into the final round for 4th place.
It certainly would be. Madbird would be narrowly ahead by virtue of countback on those terms, given that he has recorded a 2nd place finish and Brenton Foley is yet to do that so far this season. Early days yet, he may get one done in the last stages as Ziras posts the fastest lap of the race.
So he had some pace up his sleeve. Obviously, that's a fantastic lap from Ziras, and I don't know if we've seen him in the 41s up to that point. Before that, it was 42s, if I'm not mistaken.
Just goes to show that Sam Smith wasn't able to get all the pace out of that Porsche 935 that he wanted, and that Ziras is really absolutely formidable in these BMW 320s and is able to get them absolutely rapid around any track he puts it on.
I'm interested in the pace of Nether right now, who's slowly clawing away at the advantage that Brenton Foley has over him. So they had a great and he goes off the track. Oh, I shouldn't talk. I have to, though. It's my job. I've got to talk about these races. So he's had a bit of difficulty there in lapping Pablo, and he's thrown away a fair bit of time on that lap, thick end of 4 seconds, so he's got a lot of work to do all over again, but he still has some pace with 12 minutes remaining in this race. And Foley, we saw making a few mistakes earlier on, so Nether having that great battle with Brenton Foley last week in Portimao, and that ended in very, very bizarre circumstances where Brenton Foley got by. Oh, what's happened there? Brenton Foley. Speaking of Brenton Foley, why is he down in 5th? Has he had a moment?
I'm just looking back through some replays now, trying to figure out if it was any time recent or if we missed it when we were discussing one of the other cars. And I may have to rewind a little bit further than I already have because I can't really see where he's gone wrong. So I'd say he's made an error somewhere, but I just don't know where.
Yeah, we can't see it on the replay. It may well be a timing glitch, and my live timing is resetting at the moment, so I can't watch his sector times, but he's showing, well, there he goes. He is actually now reset in 3rd place, because I was just looking at the time. It was 40 seconds to the leader, even though it was showing him in 5th place, and now they're down in 47 seconds. So we apologise to you Brenton Foley fans. We were confused by our timing screens. All we needed to do was look at the gap to the leader, and that gave us all we needed to know.
So Brenton Foley still sitting in 3rd position, looking to get himself back on the podium for the first time since the Caterham Series last time out. So he was very strong in those cars, as we touched on earlier. Of course, Ziras was untouchable pretty much. Won almost every race except for, I think, 1 or 2 where Brenton Foley was able to take the wins. So it was Brenton Foley who finished 2nd in that championship in 8 and 7 and hasn't been able to replicate the same success in the DRMs until now, purely because of the amount of attrition that we've seen in this race so far.
Yeah, that's for sure. If Ziras wins this race, it would become he would become the 2nd driver to win 3 races after Sam Smith, who clinched his 3rd win of the championship last week in Portimao. So that would be a fantastic result from him, and incidentally, they're both going to be quite a ways behind Goofball Antics. He's only had the 1 victory, but his consistency has kept him in this championship hunt, and this was looking like the race where he wasn't going to be able to finish on the podium. The pace that he had looked like he was going to be around about 4th place, but well, he's in 2nd right now, and that would be his best result since the 5th round in Watkins Glen after finishing 3rd 3 times in a row.
He's not able to gain very much time on Ziras at the front, mind you. The gap between those two is still sticking to about 40 seconds, give or take about 5 seconds, depending on what part of the track they're on. So it looks like Goofball Antics won't get much higher than that unless Ziras makes a mistake, which he probably won't do because Ziras is a very cool, calm, and collected driver, and he knows how to keep a car online and on the circuit and pointing in the right direction. So the greatest threat that Goofball Antics has at the moment is from Brenton Foley, who is now 10 seconds behind. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to claw back any of that speed. He's got a little bit more power in that Ford Capri, so he might be able to get some time back up on the straights. Yeah,
the last 2 laps, the last lap indeed, Brenton Foley and Goofball Antics were matched to the 10th of a second. So unless Goofball Antics makes a mistake, Brenton Foley will need a little bit of luck in order to get that 2nd place position. Goofball Antics isn't going to be able to overhaul a 35-second advantage in 8 minutes, and he shouldn't be pushing too hard right now. Even if he were to finish 1st and Ziras finishes 2nd, Ziras would still be in with a shot of the championship in the next round. The gap would be 24 points to Goofball Antics' favours. But as it is right now, with Goofball Antics in 2nd place, he would be on 165 points, with Ziras on 151, which puts him 14 points clear at the top. So Goofball Antics would have to have a bit of a deviation from his consistent run of podiums in order for Ziras to clinch the championship.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And of course, Mr. Consistency is Goofball Antics. He would have to make a drastic error. And if he didn't finish the race, for instance, then Ziras would have to finish 3rd or higher, which is very manageable for him, of course, to clinch that championship. Otherwise, there'd have to be some very drastic position differences between the two. And Goofball just has a habit of finding his way up to the front of a grid as the race progresses, doesn't it? As we've definitely seen today. Floating around 7th position due to that mistake earlier on, then the pit stops, and then the crash at the end of the back straight came, and all of a sudden he's in 2nd position, isn't he?
Yeah, it's been a remarkable championship from him. It really has, and even on the days when he has not looked the best, he has not looked the fastest, he has had these drives which add up to a championship. And I don't want to speak too soon for him, of course, because there's still 7 minutes and another race to go. But he's put himself in a very, very good position, and he richly deserves that. Just staying out of trouble. His worst race probably Montreal, where he had a few a few off tracks. He was last at one point, if I'm not mistaken, but he fought back to finish on the podium there. And let's not forget his brilliant victory in Belle Isle all the way back in round 2. I'm sure he'll want to cap off with another win, but right now Ziras is absolutely untouchable. He's pulling away from Goofball Antics at the rate of about 2 seconds a lap right now. All the other battles seem reasonably settled. Nether doesn't seem to be able to do too much about Brenton Foley. 5 seconds between them, and Madbird a further 4 seconds behind Nether down there in 5th place, with Pablo and Roadhog a lap and 2 laps down respectively.
I've only been commentating on the Apex Rear Wing series for the last 2 seasons, so I've only seen the DRMs and the KDMs in action, but both times Ziras has been absolutely rapid. And I'm beginning to wonder if it's just due to the lighter cars. I'm not sure how he's been getting on with some of the heavier cars, because he's, of course, one of the most seasoned veterans of the Apex Rear Wing series, isn't he, Stairs? He
is, and I'll put your mind at ease on one thing. He's fast no matter what you put him in. Even if it's a car like this that is taken him a long time to get to grips with. Once he does get to grips with it, he's nigh on untouchable, and the gap between Goofball and Ziras right now is evidence of that. And Ziras will probably just be ruining a few bad results, retirement here and there, and just a few days where he just wasn't on the pace. It took him a little bit too long to come to terms with this car. And barring a disaster from Goofball Antics, it will have been probably one race too late, because I think if we were to extend this to a 12 or 13 round championship, Ziras would very much be the favoured man to take it home from here.
Just goes to show how important it is to get points on the board for every single race if you want to be a championship contender. Because if you get a DNF at all, you're going to be losing, 25 potential points, and that takes a huge chunk out. Of course, Ziras DNF that very first race at the Brno circuit, so he was well down the championship order and has been slowly clawing his way up, and will now be sitting in 2nd position, which is the highest he's been in the championship all season long. And unless something drastic happens at the next race, it's as high as he will finish once the season comes to a close. Obviously, that's a long way away, and there's plenty of wood I'm touching around here to make sure nothing too drastic happens. He's only 2/10 off his best lap at the moment, though, so he's not slowing down too much at the front of this race, just to detract from my points slightly there. So Ziras is still plugging away. He must have plenty of fuel on board that thing, plenty of tyres at his disposal as well. And there's 4 minutes left in this race, so I'd say there's probably only about 3 more laps in it, or thereabouts. So not too long before this race reaches its conclusion.
Exactly right. And those races that we were referring to earlier on in the championship, where Ziras just wasn't quite on pace. He didn't get his first podium until the 4th round in Barbagallo, and there was a season that was punctuated with 4ths and 6ths, which weren't too bad really, but it came after a DNF where he really needed to bounce back quickly, and he wasn't able to do so. It wasn't until Montreal where he really got himself on a roll, and he hasn't finished worse than 2nd since then. But the unfortunate thing from his point of view is that Goofball Antics finished no worse than 3rd throughout the first 8 rounds of this championship, and looks like doing so again today. So that means that in every single round, Goofball Antics has picked up at least 16 points, and sometimes more.
Been a bit of discussion amongst the drivers on whether or not to incorporate a dropped round format for future series of Apex Rear Wing, because, of course, not every driver can make it to every single round. We've seen Birdo on holiday for 3 of those rounds. We've seen a couple of other drivers missing. So a few of the guys have been flirting with the idea of having a drop round system where your worst round result gets excluded from your championship total, which means if you miss one race, doesn't affect your championship standings too much. If you get one bad result, if you do make every single race of the season, it's not counted too much. There's still a little bit of discussion yet, and there's still a long way, of course, until the next season of ARW starts. Haven't even put much thought into what cars and what tracks will be racing around that time. We've still got a season on our hands at the moment. But that could be something to keep an eye out for in the future, because that can make championship battles very interesting. But as it stands at the moment, it's just come to the track, get some points on the board if you can, and that's where you stand in the championship battle. And as a result of that, and as a result of every single one of the podium finishes that Goofball Antics has scored throughout this season, he is currently sitting pretty at the top of the table.
He most certainly is. 2 minutes remaining in this race, and another factoid that our audience may find interesting is that after this round, if the positions finish as they are right now, which looks very likely that they will, we will have 2 cases, or 4 drivers in fact, who are tied on points. So in 2 different positions. So I mentioned earlier, Madbird and Foley would be tied on 101 points apiece, tied in 4th place. We also would have a tie between Pablo and 66 points apiece for 9th place, and that would be one that would go to account back in favour of Nether if he continues to run in 4th place.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Stairs. I think Goofball's had a moment. He's lost a lot of time, and Brenton Foley's now only 3 seconds behind him. I think he's spun out somewhere.
Yes, he certainly has. Let's catch a replay there. A hairy moment for Goofball Antics. And just going... Oh, there's a mid-corner snap of oversteer for him. Wonder if he just got onto the throttle marginally too early, and the turbo wrestled the car out of his hands as Roadhog had to take avoiding action coming around the corner. There is the gap there. 51 seconds remaining, and this is getting a little bit nervous now for that final spot. Well, sorry, the last 2 spots on the podium. Goofball Antics will want that advantage over Ziras in the points in the final round to be as big as it possibly can be. Where is Ziras now? Let's have a look at him. I can't quite make out where he is on the racetrack with 30 seconds remaining, whether it'll be 2 laps or 3 laps more.
I think he's coming towards the back straight now, so I'd say it's going to be a 33-lap race.
Yep.
Yes.
So Goofball Antics just has to keep his powder dry for that small amount of time. Let's have a look at the lap times between Goofball Antics and Brenton Foley. Of course, on the last lap, it will have been a little bit longer for Goofball Antics with that big spin. 53.7 I should say, so he lost about 6 or 7 seconds to Brenton Foley on that lap, but prior to that he was lapping quicker than Brenton.
So it's now a question, as the margin goes down to just under 2 seconds between those 2 cars, of whether Brenton Foley can do very much to reach Goofball Antics. If Goofball makes another mistake, of course, that's going to be music to the ears of Brenton Foley. He'll be back up on the rostrum in style in 2nd position. But that's down to whether or not that happens, and of course whether or not Brenton Foley is able to prevent himself from making mistakes of his own. But it looks like in the later stages of this race, Brenton Foley's really calmed down his driving style quite some bit. He's not sliding around anywhere near as much as he normally does, particularly in his qualifying laps. So I think Brenton Foley's looking very good to finish this race where he is at the moment in 3rd position. Meanwhile, at the front, Ziras is on the final lap, and he's just going through what I think is... I'm not sure where he is on the track.
First corner, I think he's coming up to turn 2, the Carlos Pache left-hander.
Yes, that's exactly right. There's not a huge amount of landmarks around this very flat and open track, unfortunately. So I don't have a huge gauge on this circuit of where cars are as he goes through turn 3 now. So he's on the final lap of 33, and he is currently ahead by 1 minute and 6 seconds. So that's a huge gap, and Goofball Antics hasn't even crossed the line to start that final lap yet.
The Goofball Antics now with an advantage over Brenton Foley of 2 seconds. He seems to have steadied the ship so far. Looking at the sector times, pretty much identical to Brenton Foley in the middle sector. Goof won't want Foley to get too close as they get to the big long straight out of turn 5, because that Ford Capri does have a power advantage over the BMW 320, but he seems to have pegged that gap at around the 2 second mark as it is. Ziras is now coming into the final sector of the lap and will, in very short order, claim his 3rd victory of this Apex Rear Wing Championship. He doesn't lap Pablo. Pablo is clear enough of him, and an advantage in the end of 56 seconds on my screen. Final corner for Ziras, and keeps himself in the championship hunt, but it was going to be a lot closer with Resist and Sam Smith in the fight earlier on, but Ziras will be nonetheless happy to become a 3-time race winner in Season 8 of Apex Rear Wing.
Not necessarily a win he might have been expecting, but it is a win nonetheless for Ziras. Great result for him, and he's finished with a massive margin over any car behind him as a result of those 2 other contenders for the race dropping out due to that highly unusual crash that we saw at the end of the back straight earlier in the race at around the halfway point, just after the pit window had finished. So Goofball Ant got a few more corners to go before he reaches the end, and he's got a gap of 1.4 seconds ahead of Brenton Foley. So Foley's been able to claw back a little bit of time on the back straight, but I don't think it's going to be enough, bar any mistakes from either of these 2 cars. So at the moment, it's still looking like Goofball Antics will be finishing 2nd and Brenton Foley will be 3rd. There's one more corner to go for Goofball as he goes past the pit entry now. Goes through the box corner now into the Victoria Bend. And this will be the final corner for Goofball Antics race, and he will cross the line to finish in second position and maintain his lead on the championship. And Brenton Foley's lights ablaze. He's absolutely stoked because as a result of all the drama we've seen, he's back on the rostrum for the first time this season.
Best result of the season also for Nether, 4th place, backing up his previous best, which was 5th last week. So Nether finishing this season strongly, and a result that he can be richly pleased with as Madbird comes across the line to finish 5th. He's the final man on the lead lap with Pablo and Roadhog both going 2 laps down, and Pablo finishing ahead in that battle, and Roadhog just coming across the line now.
Pablo had already pulled it into the pits at that point. I think he'd retired the car for whatever reason, but he still has finished 6th place on account of that gap that he had over Roadhog. So Roadhog will bring up the rear, and he will be the final runner of this race, finishing in 7th position and taking home 9 points as a result. What a weird race that was.
Yeah, that's very much one word for it. There are many others. Let's get a few words from our race winner, Ziras. I'm sure you weren't expecting to win that way.
No, it's a little disappointing, to be honest. I was hoping for a ding-dong battle on the last stint, and that was ripped away.
It very much was. You were right in the middle of that 3-car battle when Sam Smith and Resist unfortunately came to blows. Tell us what you saw from your perspective.
Well, I saw them just blasting away down the straight and asking them to come back, which they didn't. And then all of a sudden they were just together, breaking into the long bend. So, yeah, it was a lot of disappointment there.
I'm sure. Bittersweet, of course, because you do go into the lead of the race, but then it put your championship rival, the championship leader, Goofball Antics, into second in the race. So it hurt your chances to pull back a few points on him.
Yeah, that is another faucet, another perspective. It'll be really tough to win the championship now. I think, I don't know the exact point calculation, but Heathy would have to finish off the podium if I were to win for me to take it. So,
well, that would be a major change in form for Goofball Antics, of course. But nonetheless, anything can happen, and championships can go down to the wire and very much be unpredictable. Let's have a chat to Goofball Antics. That was a fortunate race from your point of view. I'm sure you wouldn't have wanted to get second place that way, though.
Definitely not. I certainly do not deserve that podium.
Strong words.
No. Well, yeah, I wasn't feeling very comfortable during any practice I did at all, and yeah, so I didn't have high hopes for anything that race, and yeah, that's just some massive bad luck between Sam and Resist there. But yeah, I certainly don't deserve to be here.
Well, humble as always, but you did keep your nose clean. A little bit of a moment in the back end of the race, and it looked like Brenton Foley was breathing down your neck.
Yeah, that was a bit of a worry. I just sort of, I think I went through at a turn in a higher gear than what I usually do, and I don't know, I got the revs at the wrong point for it, and the turbo kicked in, and around I went, and I just watched that time in the delta to Foley behind me just come down and down and down and down and down, and thank God Roadhog was there, and not that he blocked Foley or anything, but I saw a car coming and thought, oh God, here it is, and no, it was Roadhog, so thank God.
Well, naturally, congratulations on keeping that podium run alive. A mixture, I suppose, you would be the first to say, of luck, but also of just keeping the car on the road, and it certainly is paying dividends with that 14-point advantage over Ziras going into the final round. We wish you the best of luck on a circuit that looks like it may well favour your BMW 320s.
Thank you. I'll carry all the luck I can into that last race.
No worries. And now let's have a chat to the man who finished third. First podium, it's hard to believe I'm saying this, of the DRM Championship. And, well, it's it's an interesting way to get the podium, but I'm sure you'll take it. And it looked like it could have been second with that moment we just talked about with Heathy.
Yeah, I was definitely pushing when I saw that he made a bit of a mistake. I was just watching the gap to Nether for most of that after I saw that the front guys had their issues. But I definitely wasn't the third fastest car in the race today. I was probably fifth or sixth fastest, but managed to keep it on the track and had a little bit of luck and finally got myself back onto the podium. And yeah, it's commonly known that I'm not a big fan of these cars, but I'm happy to have at least one podium in this season.
Well, in the later stages of the race, you were looking a lot more consistent than you have been in the earlier stages of the race, and of course the earlier stages of the season. Do you reckon you're finally starting to get a good handle on that Ford Capri now?
That was more just finally having tires that are worn on the front and new on the rear, and it kind of balanced out my driving style because it felt pretty good for a while. But yeah, I still. Yeah, I don't think I've come to grips fully with them. I'm slowly getting better, but they just haven't suited me at all.
Well, as a result of the incident that we talked about earlier with Sam Smith and Resist, of course, you have benefited from that and found your way back onto the rostrum for the first time since the Caterham. So well done again to you, Brenton Foley, and well done to Heathy, Goofball Antics, I should say, and Ziras, the other two podium sitters of this race, Stairs.
Yes, and of course, as we mentioned during the broadcast, but I'm not sure if Madbird and Foley would be aware, they are now tied on 101 points, both jumping past Birdo, who's down into 6th place. So 4th and 5th tied on points, but Madbird ahead by virtue of 2nd place in Belle Isle on the countback. So the difference will be the final round in Salvador for Madbird and Foley.
Yeah, and Salvador is a very, very tight circuit. So as we've touched on a lot during the broadcast, it's going to really be a track for those BMW 320s. There are a few fast sections through there, but there's a lot of long sweeping corners where those Porsche 935s are going to suffer. So it's going to be a race for, well, of course, Sam Smith is out of the championship contention at this point already due to that accident he had in this race. So it's going to be a battle between the BMW 320s who can take on the Salvador street circuit. I think it's a street circuit. It's I haven't actually had a good look at it yet. It is indeed a street circuit. The Circuito Ayrton Senna, one of many circuits in Brazil named after the late great Brazilian driver. So it's going to be a fantastic battle between those two cars to see who can come out trumps in the championship.
Absolutely. Well, 3 becomes 2. We went into the night with 3 drivers very much in contention for the championship. It is now just down to 2, as you said, Matty, with 30 points separating Sam Smith and Goofball Antics at the top of the championship, 165, with Ziras on 151. We will find out next week on the 21st of August at that Circuito Ayrton Senna, as you said, who will win the championship. It'll be very, very interesting. We'll see you then. Bye for now.